tell you a little bit about myself before I get into today's topic. My name, as you can see, is Tory Thorkelson, and I'm a university professor in Seoul. I teach at Hanyang University. I've been at that university for 13 years, but I've also taught teacher training programs. I've taught at an institute in Seoul for the first 2 years that I came to Korea, and I've also been involved and talked to many teachers at many different levels in Korea. So when I talk about this topic, I'm drawing on my experiences in conversations with many teachers at many different levels, but I'm trying to make it general enough that it will be useful to anyone at any level. So, having said that, let me move into the first slide here. So opening shot. And if education is always to be conceived along the same antiquated lines of a mere transmission of knowledge, there is little to be hoped from it in the bettering of man's future. If we do the same thing in our classrooms all the time, every day, teach the same textbook, focus on the same points, do them the same way, then we become boring. And that's probably the quickest way for burnout to occur in teaching. So we want to keep what we're doing in the classroom interesting for ourselves and also interesting for our students. So motivation starts with us first. We have to be motivated and interested in what we're doing. And I know that's often hard to do when you've got conversation classes again, and 6 of them, and 35 students, or whatever the case may be. But we need to find our own way to be passionate and interested in what we're teaching and how we're teaching it. Sorry. Thanks, David. Time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all of its students. Our time is limited. As we've been talking about in previous workshops today, most of us have 50 minutes in the classroom or 40 minutes in the classroom. I have 90 minutes in the classroom, which is wonderful, except that previously I had 2 hours in the classroom, and it's been cut down to an hour and a half. So time is limited. We want to use our time effectively, and we want to vary the activities that we're doing with our students to keep it interesting for us and for them. A little educational psychology. What is the average attention span of a young learner? Child, perhaps. 15 minutes for a young learner. Okay. You have very gifted learners. Any other guesses?
What age?
What age? Well, for young. So for children, maybe 6 to 8. How long are they going to pay attention?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, exactly. 5 minutes is the golden number. And then if you get up into middle school, you don't have a hand up there over here. Middle school, more like 10 minutes, maybe. And by adult learners, how many minutes? Back to 5. Back to 5. You have the slow. Yes. If they're interested and they're motivated, it's supposed to be about 20 minutes. But again, most classes are 50 minutes or longer. And maybe if you have a long class, you can take a break in the middle. But again, that can also bring the energy of your class down. So that's both an advantage and a disadvantage. So we want to keep in mind how much time we have and how many activities and what types of activities we're doing in the classroom as well. So some definitions. Motivation, the reason why we do something. So why are you a teacher? Is it the great vacations?
The money.
The money, of course. Money. It always comes back to the money. Yes. And you get paid so much more than I do, Dave, that it's not even funny. What are some other reasons to be a teacher? Yes?
I like knowing that I have an impact and there's a difference in somebody else's life.
Big difference, small difference, doesn't matter perhaps, just as long as there's a difference.
Well, no matter what I do, I always try to think of like going back to grade school or high school or university, who do I remember and why? And why do I remember certain professors or teachers? And you do remember, you know, a handful of them. So they always had an impact. There was always some kind of message or so.
Right, so they were knowledgeable of their subject, or they were passionate, or most of my students would say they were handsome, or they were pretty, and they could teach. Usually those two things go together. So if you don't look like a pop star or a movie star, which I don't, then you have to have something else to go with. Intrinsic and extrinsic. So intrinsic means what comes from inside you. If we can connect to what the students bring to the classroom, what they want from English, what is interesting about English for them, then we've already accomplished half of our task. It makes it so much easier for us to get them doing what they want to do. So one thing I do here is, in at least one of my classes, this is a discussion class, I have them choose the topics that they want to talk about. And I give them some lists, and they can choose all kinds of topics, and they can add some of their own ideas as well to the list. So that's where we get the curriculum from. They choose the topics, and we talk about those topics. And there's none of this, oh teacher, the topic is boring, because, well, you chose the topic. You chose to be bored today. Extrinsic. So that's where we get into the test, the exam, the assignments. Now one thing that we've discovered at our university that works really well, we did away with those standardized midterm and final exams probably about, my history's a little rough here, but maybe 6 years or 7 years ago. We stopped expecting all of our freshmen to do the same exam at midterm and final. And we gave everyone the option to do a variety of different things in the classroom. So attendance is there, participation is there, but you can do interviews, you can do quizzes, you can do journals, you can do presentations, and then the rest of it's up to you. So I try and tailor what I'm doing, of course, to the skills that my students are trying to develop. And now I'm teaching skills-based classes, so that usually means presentations, job interview skills, and discussion debate is another class, and then the writing as well. So I'm able to focus in on those needs. But the principles are still the same. We need to meet the needs of the students, and we need to vary the ways that we're evaluating them as well.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure, Dave.
You said they can choose between A, B, C, and D.
Well,
within the class,
yeah.
Can the students, some choose one, some choose another, or the class chooses as a whole?
Now, you mean the topics, or do you mean the evaluation scheme?
Yeah, you said journals, or interviews, or quizzes.
Okay, that's up to the teacher. The teacher chooses those.
The teacher
So the
chooses
topics,
for that class.
they choose, but the grading scheme or the evaluation scheme, we generally choose for them. Although that's not a bad idea. I've never tried that, but and as far as I know, none of my colleagues have either. But giving them some options as well would be a good choice as well. Mike, there's a handout up there. Okay, so opening shot 3. What do you think? Should we get started on that motivation research or no? So again, motivation begins with you. And how do you start with motivating? Well, you need to get to know your students, get to know what's interesting to them. And also, be able to read the signs. When your students come in, you know, on a Monday morning, they're all tired out, then you might want to find out why they're tired out before you jump to conclusions that they were out partying all weekend or whatever the case may be. So they may have had an assignment to do in another class or that kind of thing. So I like to find out what's going on with other classes as well. Yes, Joanna?
I actually, in all my classes, I have a student profile at the beginning of class, so I have them write who they are, what experience they have with English learning, so if they travel, and then depending on the course, what is it that they hope to learn from or gain from. So, and then like their hobbies, so I kind of have like a general profile of my whole class, and I kind of know what's common, what's not common, and what's interesting, and what have I not even thought of. And so, yeah, kind of keep that little profile picture.
That's true. That's exactly. I do the same thing as well, but it's very basic. And of course, now I teach all English language literature students, so I don't really have a problem because I'm in the department and I know what's going on. But when you teach other majors, so you teach a mixture of majors, it's very important to get that kind of information to know what's going on. And if you can talk to other teachers about it as well, that's good too. Okay. Now, some theories of motivation. Get over the dry stuff so we can get into some interesting other stuff. Behavioral approaches. So this is the reward system, basically. We're talking about, you know, Pavlov and the Skinnerian and pigeons and that kind of thing. Rewarding behaviors. So how do you reward behaviors in your classroom? Or do you? Praise. Good job. Well done. Okay. Yep. Anything else that you do? Yes, Joanne.
I create competition.
Competitions. Oh, you're like competitive. Okay, how do you do that?
Actually, this semester I have 3 of the same courses, and so I'm having a winner for each class, and then have the 3 winners, the 3 groups compete against each class.
Okay, so they compete throughout the term.
Yes.
Then. Okay, that works. Yeah, for many teachers that works.
I smile.
You smile, as opposed to a usual frown. Okay, that's good motivation. Teacher smiled today. That was good. Anything else? Some people like, you know, for younger children, they like the stickers. There was actually a good article, I didn't bring it, but there's a good article in the Tech, the English Connection this month, about elementary school and motivating your students and keeping, like John was saying, keeping a competition going, and at the end giving them some kind of reward, a movie or something like that. That's another way. Me, I use bonus points is what I do. So if someone volunteers, I give them a bonus point. Or if they clean the board off for me or something like that, I give them a bonus point. But I have phantom bonus points days. So they're like, teacher, is there a bonus point today? And I go, no, if there was, you'd get it today, but tomorrow, there'll be a bonus point. So it's random reinforcement as well. The humanistic approaches, we have, well, probably Maslow was the best example of this, satisfying their physiological needs, hunger and food and shelter, and then to safety and esteem, feeling valued and respected as members of the community. I like to emphasize that it's our classroom, it's not my classroom, so our rules are to be reinforced by everybody, not just by me. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but they need to feel the community spirit. And doing a lot of group work and pair work, for me, is the way to build up that camaraderie and that respect for each other, and also the community spirit. Cognitive approaches, so then we're getting into the thinking processes. That's sort of more Bloom's taxonomy, pushing them past the memorize, exam, forget cycle into more critical thinking and evaluation and putting things together. Going back to that discussion class, I'm doing sophomores this term. Previously this was a senior class and they chose fairly heavy topics, but now it's sophomores and they chose abortion, they chose euthanasia, they chose, research, animal research. These kind of topics were things they chose to talk about. They weren't things I forced on them. So I was very impressed actually with the sophomores picking that. So they were trying to get into more critical thinking ideas. And I kind of balanced that out a little bit with a really good book that I found in Kyung bookstore one day, which is What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20 by Tina Silly. And since they're sophomores, I'm using that one class a week. And they read the chapter and we discuss the chapter. And that's also going really well because she's talking about not seeing obstacles as obstacles and things like that. And finally, social learning approaches. Most of us are probably using grouping, group work, pair work, these kinds of things, collaborative efforts in our classroom. I do a lot of presentations, I do a lot of journals, that's more individual, but then I also do group debates and group discussions. Even in writing, we do peer writing, or peer editing, sorry, and that kind of thing. And I've done group writing a couple of times as well, just to vary it. So even though I'm teaching something like writing, which most students don't enjoy as much, I can move things around and adapt my activities a little bit more to that. So it's also important to keep in mind the various levels and types of learning and approaches. And again, I've already touched on these, but just so you can see them again. So it's physiological safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. So we need to achieve all the basic stuff here in order to get them up into creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, that kind of thing. And then Maslow, again, knowledge is the bottom. So recall, memorization, comprehension, they understand what you taught and they can give you back the facts, but they're not really analyzing it or making it part of their concept of English or the English-speaking world or whatever the case may be. So we want to push them up here to synthesis and judgment evaluation. One of the assignments I use with my writing classes, etc., is putting it up there to, we just had a new president elected for our university, so one of their assignments was write an essay to convince the president to do what it is he should do as president. What should he do to help the students? And of course, many of them came up with lowering tuition and these kinds of things. But there were some more creative things as well, create a council with students and faculty so that they can get feedback from all levels of community. They were doing some pretty interesting things, I thought. Okay, so a personal example. If you look on your handout on the top of page 2, should be, you'll see my class rules. And there's nothing terribly exciting about these, but they're based on experiences with my students. So number 1, be on time, of course. This is Western time, not Korean time. Not as much of an issue anymore as it used to be, but I still have students who are late every day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and they need to know that that is being graded, that I'm taking grades off for that. I'm very strict about my attendance policy. Ask questions. So silence is not golden. How long do you wait for a student to answer a question, usually? 5 minutes. You're very patient.
Did you ask the question directly or ask it to the class?
Ask it to the class, yes. How long do you wait?
Well, it depends. If the first time I'll give them a few, like maybe about 10 seconds, but then if I don't get answers, I make everybody stand up. They can't sit down until they've given me an answer to some question in the rest of the class.
I like your solution, yes. Yes?
Yeah, my students, if I don't get feedback right away, then I make sure that every single person has to answer that question. They know it has to be, well, I get no volunteers, they're all doing it. So then either I'll get a lot of volunteers or then every single person has to give a comment.
Now, by right away, what's the lag time? How long do you wait?
Probably, yeah, 10 seconds.
10 seconds. That's the average. Most teachers wait 10 seconds. But of course, the theory is that you have to wait for the student to understand the question and translate it and whatever, depending on the level, and then give you back an answer. So you should be waiting longer, maybe a minute or 2 minutes. I have a colleague who is famous for usually the first term or first week or so, he will wait literally until someone answers. And he's been known to wait 10 minutes for students, and he'll just stare at them until someone answers. So it's important. Give the students time to answer your questions, or make it comfortable for them. Give them, like, we have office hours that are set as well. I'm sure many of you do that. Speak English only. Now, of course, that was when I started speaking English only. I was very strict about this. I was an English Nazi at the beginning. But the research has shown that certain times speaking Korean in an English class is okay. If it's translating a word or doing the rules, something like this, where it's helping them to move the activity along, that's okay. So I don't worry about it as much as I used to, unless it's getting in the way of their English practice. So I have to monitor this. So generally when they're in groups, I'm monitoring to see how much Korean is being spoken. Attendance and participation are important. As I said, students still tend to come sometimes 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late, or they'll disappear to the washroom for 30 minutes. I have one student right now who loves to disappear to the washroom for 30 minutes. Every time he does that, he loses a point. So at the end of the term, we will see. Cell phones, and sorry, beepers, this is a long time ago, must be turned off. Need I explain? Now, how do you tell that a student is using a cell phone in class? Where do they put the cell phone, usually? Right, so if I'm texting, I'm down here. And with my friend, I'm down here. If I'm using the dictionary, which I allow, it's right up here. So a teacher can see me doing that. So immediately, as soon as I see them looking down at their lap on a regular basis, or I see them doing this, I know that they're pretty much using a cell phone. So I don't even have to go over and look most of the time. So it's very important to keep an eye on those things. But now I'm hearing that some teachers, like Piotr from Tailoring, is using his cell phones in class. He's getting the students to use them to text each other or to go outside the door. One student will stay inside, one student goes outside. They have a conversation and then come back in and talk about the content of the conversation. I think we're going to have to start integrating cell phones and smartphones and you know, iPads and tablets into our classrooms more than we are now. But thank God I'm not at that point yet. This is our class. As I said, it's a group attitude. Right? We have to share ideas. So by negotiating topics and issues and discussing things in class and allowing them to, you know, to ask questions about anything they'd like to ask questions about, we want to open that up. And not just to me, to each other as well. I do a lot of grouping. And how do you group your students? Do you like odd numbers or even numbers?
Depends on the activity.
Depends on activity. So on average, would you say you go with even or odd numbers? Four. Odd. Okay. Why do you like odd numbers?
I have three. I have a discussion leader, note taker, and a reporter.
Aha, roles, also very important. Okay, and you like even numbers?
I go with whatever numbers we have in class. So if it's 15, we'll go in threes.
Okay.
It never seems to work out if I have a specific number in mind ahead of time.
Yeah, that's true. I don't necessarily have it in mind, but I usually do odd numbers because I find in discussions they're more likely to break, you know, 3 people have much more interest in discussion than 4 people because they can break into opposing camps. So yeah, I just find the odd numbers works far better. And as you say, the roles is also important. Assigning each person a role other than just discussing is important. Timekeeper and secretary and person to lead group leader and many other roles as well. So keeping each person involved clearly in the discussion. And also, do you randomly organize your groups? Like number them off or something? Highs and lows, okay, sorry, and you also highs and lows, yeah. So some days I do it just by numbering them off, other days I have the friends day and they can sit with their friends and do it as well, depending on the nature of the activity, but it is important as well to keep in mind who the higher and lower groups are. So for debates, I always assign partners for the debates to balance that out. Where it's something that's going to be a huge part of their grade, that becomes very important. Yes, Dave?
Yeah, sometimes I just have them number off and do it that way randomly. I think that helps with the community thing you were talking about before.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you just say, oh, you four, well, you're sitting beside your friend, so you never get to know the other students if you do that all the time like that.
And they never learn. 16 weeks, they never learn that if they sit next to their friend, I'm probably going to randomly number them off and send them somewhere else. So if they were smart, they would learn. Bring all class materials every day. Well, that's obvious, but recently I've had students who are showing up without notebooks. Right in class, they don't have a pen, they don't have a notebook. So I'm starting to take points off for that as well. Now, one of the tips, one of the things that worked for me after a couple of years of teaching freshmen, I discovered this. I give them my syllabus, which is 4 pages, and I go through it in English on the first day, and they get to keep it, and I tell them to read it, and they go home, and presumably they read it. But then I'd have students about halfway through going, oh, teacher, why is my grade, this? Well, because I've been taking points off for playing with your cell phone and for coming late to class. Oh, teacher, I didn't know, I didn't understand, my English is very low. So I discovered that if I translated, I got a friend to translate my rules into Korean and had them sign the rules. So I give them the English version the first day, they go over it, they go home, presumably they read it, they come back, I ask them if they have questions. They always, of course, say, no questions, teacher. So I give them the Korean version of the rules only, and have them read it and sign it, 2 versions. They keep one, I keep one on file. And then, later on, they go, teacher, I didn't know that I was going to lose points for attendance. Wait a minute, come to my office, here's my file, there's your signed contract. You broke your contract, I'm sorry. Solved all my problems in that area. So sometimes a simple thing can solve your issues with this. But as I said, I think it's very important to set that standard from the first day and to let them know what you expect from them and get some expectations from them as well. Okay, so for the next part, I want to give you some time to discuss some problems. Now again, these are problems that have happened to me or happened to my colleagues. You may have some others as well, but I'd like you to start with these. So there's 11 on the page. I'm going to group you by the people close to you for convenience. So if you're going to work with them, and then right, those 3. And you're done. Thank you. All right, we've got about 10 minutes. So I'd like to just see if each group can give us one problem and maybe the best solution to that problem. And then I'd like 5 minutes just to wrap things up. So shall we start over here with this group?
We actually started with point 11. Students saying that topics are boring. That goes back to this whole business of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and approaches and presentations. I've seen one teacher take the same topic in our college English department and turned it into a really successful lesson, and another teacher just killed the topic. So it's your approach and presentation is so important too. We had a talk about 10, which is mainly, I guess, university teachers, right? Students complain that grading is unfair. Inherently, yes, that's true. It is very unfair at times. What I think is important, you've got to accumulate some very specific data about each student and be able to justify your marks and grades. I really have, I've never had an appeal in 8 semesters at Kiami University and so on. I've had a few people inquire because I've got a lot of data. As soon as they inquire, I show them why. So they lose interest in arguing about it.
Yes. So keep notes Some, okay. Thanks, Bruce. Sorry, I was going to move on to other groups. Okay, maybe back here, Joanna.
Do you want to try? No? Okay. Well, let's see what we cross over. Number 1, refuses to speak English. It's when students have fear, so they mentioned telling them it's okay to make mistakes, building some confidence, and saying that, you know, making mistakes is a good thing. I gave an example of a little child when the mother says, "Don't touch the stove because it's hot." The mother turns around, the kid touches it. They have to actually learn, and so making mistakes is a good thing because then you remember you're actually learning something. If you were perfect, so what's the point of being here? So let's focus it on number 1.
Okay, thank you. So yes, mistakes are good. I always tell them mistakes are good, they keep me in work, so make more mistakes and I have a job. Over here, what was your problem?
Oh. We talked a bit about students and cell phones.
Yes.
One of the strategies I use, and I'm interested in everyone's feedback as to whether or not this is a good strategy, is I try to embarrass students who do that. You use the cell phone inappropriately. You know,
Yeah.
I'll stop the class and draw everyone's attention to the student. And I'm not, as a strategy, I have had mixed success with it. It hasn't been so successful that I would recommend it, but it's better than doing nothing, I guess.
So you embarrass them by bringing the class's attention to the fact that they broke the rules?
Yes.
Okay.
I do that person.
You do that too?
A freshman, I can still take them, put them on the desk ahead.
Right.
But in the hall, I don't be able to do that.
One of my colleagues likes to take it and, you know, say, "Okay, I'm going to call my mother in Canada." And turn around and, you know, yeah, okay, and so don't call in class, you know. Or if the phone goes off in class, even better, you answer the phone. "Hello, yeah, Chongshul's in English class right now, yeah, they'll call you back." Something like that. So there are ways to use it to your advantage and to embarrass them.
Well, I take it kind of after the second time, just tell them, put it away, then the second time.
So you let them do it once and then. So what about you guys? What else did you discuss in cell phones?
The textbook pen, so number 6, I was saying that if I see a student without the equipment sitting next to someone who does have the stuff, at least they're working to solve the problem. It's the student who sits by themselves that's the problem for me, and as Mike suggested, I sometimes embarrass them a little. Chodam Paksang, are you elementary school student? Again, if they're working to solve the problem, I can't complain too much. Everyone forgets, so it's
Right. If it's just once, then yeah, I like that. Although I do make a point to tell them, "Okay, I'm taking the point off. Just remember that. Don't forget."
For me, if they're sharing a book with someone, it means they're not taking such good notes. I might remind them, you're doing the work today, but will you remember it for the exam? And at the exam, I'll take away whatever marks are appropriate, so I don't feel I need to punish them too much before that.
Right. Good. Good. Or even some students will come and say, "Teacher, I forgot my book. Can I borrow yours and go photocopy it for class?" And that's fine. I have no problem with that. I would get it back, so it doesn't at all. So yes, the key point is being a little bit flexible with your rules, but you don't want to be too flexible and let them get control of what's going on necessarily or take advantage of you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the conclusions quickly. What I have here are the solutions that we came up with in my university. So one of those and pass them around. And then something else is a thing that I came across from the Teacher Center of New York, a new Teacher Center, I don't know what they call it, but some strategies for motivation and teaching language learners based on their experiences with detailed information there, so to the components. So let me move on while you're collecting those. Okay, so first of all, remember that inspiration starts with you and not your students. So as Bruce was talking about, if you are passionate and interested in your subject, then your students will often pick up on that. And if they trust you and they respect you after a certain period of time, then they're going to put up with one class of boredom or things they don't like. The example I'm using right now is Modern Language Association, MLA style, which my students detest, but they have to use for essay writing. So I always tell them, okay, you're going to hate this now, but you're going to like it later, and by the end of the term, they're usually okay. This one, a quote from a friend. Students don't care what you know, they care whether you care. So some flexibility is a good thing. So keep in mind that they are people, they're not students, and keep in contact with what's going on with them. So if they're having a rough day, or they're having a really good day, it may have everything to do with you, or nothing to do with you. So keep that in mind. The example I like to use here is the Hanyang Information Hunt. Our campus is very hilly. There's like 138 stairs to get to our building at the top of the campus. So students are pretty tired when they get there. So I used to get these freshman students who are always saying, teacher, outdoor class, outdoor class. Which of course they all think is we go outdoors and they disappear. And the teacher's left with one student maybe or something like that. So after I'd gotten this for a few terms, I said, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. You want an outdoor class? Yes, teacher, want an outdoor class. Okay, I'm going to solve your problem for you. Here is an Hanyang Information Hunt. You have to go all over campus, down to the bottom of the hill to the scavenger, to Starbucks, and to the administration center, and to the engineering building, the music hall, and all these places, all over campus, and bring me things from these places. So they can't lie. They have to go to Starbucks and get a Starbucks coffee and bring that back to me, these kinds of things. So they run all over campus for usually about 30 or 40 minutes, and I sit in the classroom and I read my newspaper. And they come back, and they're all exhausted, and I add up the scores and give them some points, and they never ask for another class again. So sometimes you have to be a little bit devious.
Where's the English learning and the scavenger?
Well, it's information about the university. So there was a chapter in our book, our early book, about Hanyang University and the history of Hanyang University. So it was tied into that particular chapter. So now we don't have that chapter anymore, but at that point it made sense. Teach by example, by finding ways to relate to your students in ways they will understand. And then the lessons you conduct will be much easier and more fulfilling. So I read a newspaper every day, so I know what Kim Yun-na's up to, or whoever the case may be, whoever the latest teen idol is. So I can talk a little bit about what's going on in the news in my classroom, or connect somewhat to what's going on. That doesn't make me cool, but at least it makes me knowledgeable what's going on. So we can talk about, oh yeah, what's Kim Yun-na doing? The Kim Yun-na lifestyle, I like to joke about that. You know, she has the air conditioner, she has the apartments, she has the bank accounts, she has the car. Everything's Kim Yun-na. Learning is a cooperative process. So learn from your students as they learn from you. And both of you will get far more out of the process than you put in. Last term, the course that I'm doing now is a sophomore class, but previously it was a senior class, and I had students doing presentations on political analysis of North Korea and, you know, the fascination with various teen pop stars and these kind of things. I really learned a lot about different things from my students through their presentations, through talking to them, through listening to them discuss things. So keep your mind open and listen from the top. Don't worry too much about making mistakes. You're going to make them, so learn from them and carry on. So when I make a mistake, I apologize. When my administration tells me new information, I apologize and I pass that on. Discipline and extrinsic motivation should go hand in hand, so carrot and stick are important. So motivation should be positive, and sometimes punishment has to come down. But usually I only have to punish students once or twice for them to get the idea. And from that point on, most students fall into line. There are exceptions, I should say. There's a couple in my class right now. Teachers don't fail students, students fail themselves. I think it's very important. Students always say, oh teacher, you gave me an A+. No, I'm not Santa Claus. I don't give A+. These aren't presents. You have to earn your A+. You start with an A+ on day one, you can only go down. So it depends on your behavior and what you do and whether you respect the rules of the class and your classmates and so on. And this I thought was interesting. A recent article rated friendliness as the most highly valued quality by students when rating excellent teachers. Are you friendly and caring without necessarily being a friend? So this is what students, and this was done in 3 different countries. I don't remember the countries off the top of my head, but it was Asia and Africa and Europe. And they looked at students and they gave them a list of qualities, and this was #1 for every country that was done. So they want a teacher who is friendly and who is caring and who is humorous and crack jokes. They don't necessarily care that you're passionate about your subject or any of these things. Yes, Joanne?
You know what, but 2 professors, one was a high school teacher and one was from the university, that I remember quite well, and I actually actually now really appreciate were the most strict, the ones that had the most discipline. And I just-
So you're the exception. You want those disciplined teachers, yeah. But of course, I don't want to go into this now, but Tim Thompson and a few other people have done very good research on what Korean teachers or Korean students expect from Korean teachers and from stop. It's the lady says stop. So from Korean teachers and from Western teachers, and they expect often very different things. And obviously, last thing, join KOTESOL and join fellow teachers and share ideas, or HEC. That's the other option. Yes, Bruce.
Tory, with this friendliness business,
Yes.
and going back to Joanna's point about making a student profile,
Mhm.
in the Career Times last week, there's an article about the pressure on
I'm sorry,
students.
I've stopped, but he's going, so.
Pressure on
minutes.
students
Thank
to earn money to support their courses. And one thing I do very early in the semester is try to get some information about which students have a part-time job. Because there's nothing worse than being in a situation like of a writing class of a student who is struggling to get their work done. And most could write much better, but are having to work night after night at Starbucks or whatever it is. And I think that comes into this whole business of friendliness and caring for your students. It's not just friendliness as such, it's understanding the pressure that they're under.
All right, just a couple of resources. The ones, the handout I gave you, the other one is a book that I discovered which has a lot of good answers for this sort of stuff. I'll bring you back to that. So thank you very much. My business